This poem, Cho Ben Thanh, Richmond, by Chris Wallace-Crabbe, focuses in on a specific moment in time, a specific part of Melbourne. It's one of his more recent poems and takes quite a modern look at multiculturalism, particularly here in Melbourne, but making a commentary at the same time about this issue of migration and immigration here to Australia, which was really pertinent in the late 1990s. The title alludes to a very famous Vietnamese marketplace. But of course, here he's making reference to the fact that this is in the heart of Richmond instead. Which is known as being a migration hub for many of the Vietnamese here in Australia. So it starts off giving us this really clear location as the point of focus for the poem itself. And as we can see, structurally, it's organised in tercets, except for this one singular line towards the end. But otherwise, very organised as a poem goes. What we can also see is that there's quite long sentences or phrases throughout. Our very first one doesn't end until the second verse concludes, and then the next half concludes with this singular line before we get the final verse just by itself. So generally very structured and organised. So just to read through the poem to start off with. Generous plane trees have embowered the slim ways to Little Saigon in Tigerland, while the Lunar Festival saunters along, burbling in crowds, from durian to pork and busy back again. Sunday-esque, double-parked, lightly erotic in sandals, I flower to the car radio's piano concerto, completed after somebody's death, while the girls in chalked high black heels are going high-pitchedly by and impish tots, adhering to balloons. Now, summer cottons tootle round the corner, moonily smiling amid the Mekong slow drivers who can't drive, to parking spots under the friendly trees. Surely this is the lively Australian brand of city some of our dear fellow citizens appear to hate. So the poem begins with some interesting imagery with regards to the trees, a trope that's actually quite common in a lot of the poems that we've looked at for Chris Wallace-Crabbe. But it's an interesting allusion, these plane trees. The ones that we have here in Melbourne are the London variety of plane trees. So there's this, interesting allusion to London, which is immediately established as part of the scenery and the landscape. But juxtaposed with this idea of Little Saigon. So already we're seeing from the onset almost the imagery of multiculturalism just in the landscape. There's also the allusion to the area itself, Richmond, sort of colloquial football term thrown in to reinforce the location. But interesting that it's also, a symbolic image or animal quite often associated with different countries in the Asian region. So he's chosen to pick up a few different things which show the clash or the overlay or juxtaposition of the different cultures. And he opens up like that. In a sense, establishing the tone for the whole poem, establishing his stance on this, that he's seeing these two worlds combined and collide. The second part of this is a description, if you like, of everything that he observes. From the durian to the pork, the burbling crowds. He's including those traditional food items, but then gets into this second section after this point of the poem, where it's far more descriptive, almost daydreamy in essence, as he observes. And so what we need to establish to start off with is that he is observing everything that's going on this street. Not necessarily participating in it himself, but he is watching along. So we get this interesting little segment here of "I flower to the car's radio's piano concerto, completed after somebody's death." So here he is sitting in the car, observing everything that's going on, and we get this interesting contrast between inside and outside. So inside the world of the car, he is listening to Western classical music. And then on the outside, what he's observing outside his car window is very much a different cultural feel and situation going on. He's got the mixed crowds. It's very much not the same situation as a classical concert or refined. It's quite loud and boisterous. You've got the chalked high black heels, people sort of squealing along high-pitchedly, the little children with the balloons tied to their wrists. Right, so there's a stark contrast with the outside world. It is, however, very much alive, and he looks at it in that sense. He's looking at this atmosphere that's going on outside. The summer cottons tootle around the corner, moonily smiling amid the Mekong slow drivers who can't drive. It carries with it quite the positive tone as he's moving along, or not moving along, but watching people moving along. The summer cottons, the language he uses is quite ambiguous. The crowd, the people that he is observing, could be anybody. However, what we see is that there are some allusions to the group of people who are attending this particular festival, who are attending that area of Richmond. So in all, he's observing all of this happening. He's observing this little snippet of, in this case, Vietnamese culture coming to life in this part of Richmond. This commentary at the end is what's really quite interesting. He takes a very moralistic approach to the tone at the end here. And it starts off with "Surely. Surely this is the lively Australian brand of city some of our dear fellow citizens appear to hate." So a few different things happening here. Very easy to read that tone here as being slightly sarcastic. Very easy to do that. And in doing so, then inferring some sort of commentary, some sort of political commentary in particular being made here. And as I said, it does carry with it sort of moralistic tone about the situation and how this fits in with the political climate of the time. In this particular instance, considering the specific cultural group that he's looking at, there's obviously some sort of commentary being made here to the Australian climate towards migration, right through to the 1990s in particular. And the attention at that particular time was really directed towards Asian migration, particularly Vietnamese migration into Australia, and how that was changing the Australian landscape in the view of some. And so here we can see the tone of this ending does pick up on that, and we see the author's view is quite contrary to some of his dear fellow citizens in that he's seeing a lively Australian brand of city. He's seeing a place close to the heart of Melbourne which has come alive with this cultural group, and that other people are coming to join in with that. And he himself, as an Anglo-Saxon British man, is observing and partaking in also. So he's making that commentary in the way that he's concluding the poem. So we'll make a quick note of that. So in all, whilst he sits, within his car, observing everything that's going along, the tone overall of this piece is, again, very positive, quite hopeful. The lively Australian brand that he comments on right to the end carries with it that very colourful and bright tone that we've come to see in quite a few of Wallace-Crabbe's poems. They're there as a common trope. He's got a very hopeful feel about the way that he often concludes many of the poems, particularly those that are evoking a sense of change or when his worldview is being challenged. And in this case, the tapestry of the Australian landscape and our demographics here in this country were changing all the way throughout the 20th century, and he's picking up on a little bit of that right towards the end of the century. So, we can make the assumption that whilst, he is an observer, he does find it exotic, a little bit odd. And yet still finds it pleasurable, colourful, and light. And so carries with it that hopeful tone that we've come to see with many of the poems. So that's just a little bit of an analysis of Chris Wallace-Crabbe's poem Cho Ben Thanh, Richmond.